Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys know who it is. This is Tony Lynch. I am the host of this podcast, and we are your number one podcast for bringing you conversations around death, dying, grief, and all the things that are associated with that. And so now I have a very exciting guest for you guys today, and you guys are going to have a great time. So before I bring her up here, just get yourself prepared to have some questions and some comments ready for us so we can answer as we go along. And now, before I bring her up here, I would like to say, if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head on over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. Now, before I bring her up here again, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. Now, without further ado, guys, help me welcome my next guest, Miss Bonnie Brindle, to the show. Bonnie, how you doing, my friend?
Oh, I am well, Mr. Tony Lynch, and glad to see you again, sir.
Yes. I love that smile that you have on your face. And does it look like the sun is working? Oh, you look at it, it's glowing. I love it.
Thank you.
So now, before we get started, tell people who you are, where you're from, and about the work that you do.
Okay. My name is Bonnie Brindle, and I am the Anxiety Avenger. And I'm in Lafayette, Colorado, not too far from our friend Tony here. And I am a therapist, as well as a transformational coach, author, and speaker, all on the subject of managing anxiety. And anxiety and all the emotions that get buried beneath it can stem from grief. So that's why I'm here with you today, and Mr. Tony Lynch.
I'm excited. I'm excited to dive into your story and everything. So I guess we start off with the basic question. How did you get into this work?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think it was my own personal experience that I needed this kind of work that helped me eventually get to this kind of work. But as a teenager and a young adult, I suffered from debilitating panic disorder and agoraphobia. Agoraphobia actually traps people in their homes or somewhere that they can't go out and function on the normal daily things like going to a grocery store and a movie and taking a train and that kind of thing. Yeah. And it was so debilitating for me that the time in my life where it became completely untenable was after I had clawed my way into the college that I wanted to go to. And my anxiety was getting ratcheted up into panic attacks. I was unable to go to classes, and I ended up dropping out after my first semester, which for me felt like a death. That was the thing I most wanted, to get to that school. I was out of my home, not look back, and boom, right back where I started from, because I couldn't just function in the daily things I needed to do. So I eventually got to a point where I was really questioning whether I wanted to be here or not anymore. And fortunately, I made the decision to reach out to a therapist, and I was very fortunate that I found the right person for that time on the first try. Was an enormous help. I didn't think about being a therapist or a coach then, but I had a business, and then I moved from Massachusetts to Colorado. I became a teacher and a staff coach in public education for 25 years. And in the middle of that, in 2005, I knew that I wanted to set up a retirement vehicle. Like, what am I going to do when I'm finished with education? Because I wasn't going to sit on the couch. So I became a therapist, and I've been doing that part-time ever since 2005. But then I retired from public ed last May and found that this world today is way different, the 2005 world that I thought it might look like. Yeah. So because of the ability to use online measures as well as in person, I can do coaching for anyone, anywhere in the world. I still do personal and private therapy. I work with groups, teams, businesses, corporations on training around how to communicate better in the workplace, how to recognize other people's, what you might imagine other people's behaviors to be motivated by. And here I am. And I wrote a book called Cracking the Crazymakers Code, which is a easily accessible memoir of my own experience, in which I put a free printable journal, a guided journal, for other people who are feeling anxious and struggling and want to take a path out similar to what I designed for myself. So that's me in a nutshell.
I love that. I love that. Right. And thank you for the work that you do. I was just talking with someone not too long ago, and they were struggling with anxiety. And, when we unpacked it, they were dealing with some unresolved trauma. Right?
Yes.
And they didn't know it. That's the crazy part. Knowing, like, they're going through these things. And I started noticing as we were talking, like certain things that the eyes was always wandering, right?
Hmm.
Looking for something. And then, when they became fixated on something, I would just watch their body language. And they were just like, started fidgeting. And I knew right then and there, like, okay, we need to go to a more quieter environment where they can become more stable. Right.
Great.
Now, let's talk about. I want to dive into some of the things that can trigger a person's anxiety because you said it. Like there's grief, there's trauma, there's a lot of variables that can play a part of that.
There are. There are. And how astute of you to recognize that that person was dealing with layers of trauma under what looked like anxiety. And
Hmm.
and it was anxiety. And I'm not saying it wasn't, but it has so many roots. Anxiety has so many roots. And I think we kind of shame people who behave anxiously, like, "Well, why can't you just relax? Like, what are you making such a big deal out of that for?"
Right.
As if it's only whatever that trigger might be in the moment. And like you noticed with that person who dealt with trauma, underneath anxiety are traumas and emotions and fears and um, experiences with other people and situations around them in the world that become blocked in folks. And when they become blocked, we don't know what to do with them. And if we
Right.
don't know what to do with them, they come out, they leak out in anger and frustration and anxiety and withdrawal and addiction and paranoia and all the things
Mm.
that we live with every day and wonder why we're stuck feeling the way we feel sometimes.
Right.
And anxiety is just blocked energy. That's when I
Yeah.
tell people like, "Oh, it's so complicated and chaotic," and oh, it is when you're living in it, honey. Oh, good Lord. Bad news.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'm glad that you brought that up because, again, as I mentioned before, a lot of people don't even know that these things can have an adverse effect on them, right?
Mm, mhm.
And, what we may see people acting out, but
Yeah.
when you get to the root cause of it, they're really not acting out. They're acting in the moment,
Yes.
right? And that's someone who does grief work. I make it a personal journey to follow people through their journeys
Mhm.
because and I could be wrong on this, but but people will take you back to a moment where these things happen.
Oh, yeah.
So they may be present, and that's where I try to teach a lot of people or mentor them, or even just bring it up. Like sometimes you have to quiet yourself to listen to the person that's talking, right? There's no fixing this, but you have to go back to the place to where they are. Because
Mhm.
mentally they're not with you in that moment. They're standing in front of you, but mentally they're not there. Something has triggered and opened up that response. And a lot of times I know for myself, and just so when I speak about this, a lot of times when I would have bouts of anger, right? And that violent side would come out of me. I realized that I was having a childhood response to what had happened to me when I was 6, right? And I would go into survival mode. Most people will go into flight or fight, right? You know what I'm saying? My response was, we're gonna have to fight, right? And so that was my response. But I know there's a lot of people, um, what we may call social awkwardness. It's just a person not feeling, not wanting to be around other people, right? And I love that term. It's too peoply. I got to get out of here. It's too peoply, right? Share your thoughts on that with me. What's some of your experiences?
Well, if you go back for a minute to the when we're stuck in what is called the sympathetic nervous system and our fight or flight comes up, there's four sections to that. There's the fight, which we're going through when you had your anger situation, that would come up for you first. Flight, I'm getting out of here. Two people for me. I love that.
Yes,
There's
two
also
people.
freezing, when people withdraw,
Hmm.
and fawning, where people will will acquiesce to whatever that other power is and just go along, get along to go along. If you look in our political world right now, there's a whole lot of fawning going on.
Yes, yes.
Right? So fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. There's 4 layers to that, and they look very, very different, but they're often triggered by similar emotions. And when I first started working with a therapist, I couldn't name my emotions. In my upbringing, in my family, emotions were not allowed. They just cut off. And so I got there and I'm like, I'm crazy. I'm here because I'm crazy, because I felt crazy.
Hmm.
And I couldn't identify any of my emotions, how I was feeling, how to channel any of that. I had to learn all that, like people like learning to walk. But
Right.
in the meantime, it was coming out in my personality as one time confrontational and another time avoidant. I would go one the other. The issues would be presented to me. I'd either confront or neither of those extremes is really helpful to
Right.
manage yourself. But that was how I was surviving at the time. So I really understand now when I look at other adults and I work with other people and stuff that some people might take personally. I don't, because I know it's not about me.
Hmm.
It's about their own struggle that they haven't had the option and the opportunity to walk through and come out on the other side.
Right. Which leads me to my next question. Like, how does one begin to unpack these things to get down to the root cause?
Big question. And it's why I put the journal in my book, because like, how do you start looking at yourself? And in the very beginning, the let me just go really quickly to the first chapter and read you the reflection questions. For those of us who were raised with family situations that were not healthy, this was a good one. And then I often hear from clients and coaches, "Oh, my family was normal, the usual stuff people did."
Mm,
And then we
yeah.
start talking, and I'll be like, yeah, what?" Right? What we go through is normal to us because it was us. It was like,
Right.
and right. And then we start taking that stuff apart, and it's like, oh, okay, there are some things to work with here. So, in just the reflection questions after the first chapter. In your early life, what did you think of as normal behaviors or relationships that weren't? Whose actions have you made excuses for or chosen to ignore? What comparisons have you made between your family and other people's families?
Hmm.
And have you sought comfort and support in others outside of your immediate family? Why did you? So just starting to examine that, like, yeah, my mom would probably have been diagnosed as a borderline personality disorder. My dad was an alcoholic. No one had to look closely to see that. My grandfather, one of my brothers. I mean, and you grow up in an environment where everybody is triggered and
Hmm.
all just riding their own waves, trying to keep it together, and no one's communicating or grounding. And you know what happens. You've been there.
Yeah. And a lot of it sounds generational too, right? You know what I'm saying? Generational trauma, things that have been passed down. And that is a huge thing that people never pay attention to neither, right? Because again, when you live in an environment where it's like that, you think, okay, I'm around people that drink all the time. That must be the way that it is, right? Or I'm around people that, that punch you, or beat you all the time. That must be the way that it is, right? And we don't really pay attention to how it affects us. But another thing too that I started paying attention to, and it was one thing that I did some work on after I began to do a self cleansing, right? And what I mean by that, I had to go back in and ask myself, what habits did I pick up from people that are not mine?
Hmm.
And I had to begin to take those things away because I realized that energy was still trapped inside of me, and it was affecting the way that I was living my life. So once I got down to the bare minimum, right, I began to go, okay, these are mine, right? These are mine. But that's also a personal journey of becoming my own individual self, my authentic self,
Hmm.
right? having my own thoughts, having my own emotions and things like that, without interference from anyone else. I never wanted someone to say, "Oh, you got that from me." No, I didn't. Right. So I went back to the drawing board, Bonnie. I said, nope. I don't want anybody to ever say that. These are all mine. So if you see me do something, yeah, those are mine. So what are your thoughts on that though, right? The generational trauma that's being passed down, but also picking up unhealthy habits from other people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So where you are today, you do it, you did it. But that's not everybody's thing, because you're right. And I call that the crazy making generational inheritance. What
Okay.
comes down to us. All I have to think about is my mom, Depression era woman. Her dad, World War I veteran. Like, right there, two people who struggle with all the piles of stuff that they carried, and the ways that they raise their children, and the way
Hmm.
that they communicate or don't. That's just from way back. And generations and generations ago, children were treated like adults. My own mother had said to me, children should be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's it comes down. So you got all that stuff raining down on you, and then you cannot help to pick up and absorb some of that, or a lot of that.
Hmm.
And then, like you say, you've rebuilt your life. You've recreated your own life so that you're not carrying that stuff anymore. When I looked at that as a teenager, like when I was 12, was where I really got that my dad was an alcoholic. Like, he caused a car accident right in front of our house, and came into the house and opened the refrigerator and grabbed a gallon of milk. I have this in one of the chapters of my book. Picked up the whole gallon of milk, just drank out of it, drank some, poured the rest on the floor. And I thought, oh, click. As usual, he's coming home having been drinking a lot, but now I really get how bad this is.
Right.
And I started at that age to really see that some of the things that my parents did that were good and generous, and they both loved animals, and we always had a lot of animals, and took care of strays and that kind of thing. But my dad was super racist and always used all the terms for all the other people that weren't white males out loud. And I was like, that's something I'm never going to do. Those words would never come out of my mouth. That love for animals is something I picked up, and I follow that forward. So there's good and bad qualities of all of our family members. And if we look at ourselves and what our own qualities are, did we pick those up from the generational inheritance, or did we pull the good stuff and let the ugly stuff go? Because you really
Hmm.
have to think hard about that, because you can't help it. You're dipped in that soup for years and years. Um,
Right.
you're either going to behave like your family, or maybe reject some of the behaviors that they have because they feel so often they're wrong.
Yeah. How often is the environment that you're in affects how that how that plays out as well? Because I know for those like myself who grew up the way that I did, we carried a lot of disposable emotions, so to speak, right? To where we learned to accept things on the way that it was. Like, what I'm saying, like if we saw something happening, right? We just looked at it and went, all right. But we also had that understanding that, hey, this could be you.
Mhm.
This could be you. So, and again, when I say this, I'm speaking from a place of my own experience where, there was 20 plus years of my life where I lived under survival, right? You know what I'm saying? It was like, if I don't survive, I have to be okay with this. But I'm gonna do everything I can to survive, which means whatever that looks like, by even as Malcolm X says, by any means necessary, right? So whatever that looked like, that's the way I maneuver through life. Um, some people may say, may look back on my life as like that was bad or this or another. Um, I looked at it as, what would you do?
Mm.
Right? You know what I'm saying? Who are we to say was right or wrong?
Yeah.
so to speak, right?
Yeah.
These are things that we carry along with us. But yeah, to the question, how 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 does the environment affect how that shows up, and how our how anxiety the triggers, so to speak, right? You know what I'm saying? Can that play a role in that as well?
Oh, absolutely. So everyone's heard the nature versus nurture. La 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 la. There's no versus. Nature and nurture both create us. What we are physically brought into the world with and what we are emotionally picking up from the experience of being in the world becomes who we are. Right. And so you and I had a long conversation previously, and you
Hmm.
told me about the true life, death, physical life, death survival of being in a situation where you were surrounded by gang activity and participated in some of that in the past, right? So,
Hmm.
like you saw, this thing just happened. I have to continue, but I'm going to register. That could be me. And
Hmm.
I don't want that to happen to me. So, of course, anxiety and anger and frustration and fear and sadness and all that rolled up in a ball, you put that forward. What I find fascinating is how similar we are, even though I'm a melanin challenged person and I grew up on the ocean in New England where I saw maybe one black kid in my high school. And life and death in the streets? Nope. Could I go out to the playground anytime and not worry about being shot? Yep. In here was where my anxiety and chaos and fear and rage and I don't know if I'm going to survive this came from. Yours is so physical, right? So in your face every day. And mine was in my head and I'm just carrying it around by myself. I'm with these crazy people. I know these people are nuts. How the hell am I going to get out of here? How am I not going to become like them? Right? Just like you're looking at that too. And I find that fascinating that through the environments we both grew up in, completely different, we would both develop the anxiety of, am I going to survive this and get out of the situation that I'm in and live a full life? And I don't even know where to start.
Right.
That fascinates me.
See, and also with me as well, right? Because you know, talking with amazing people like yourself and so many others, we realize that the lives that we live, the work that we do, right? You know what I'm saying? And when we start sharing our stories, we realize that we've been on similar paths this whole time. We just never, and now we just now crossing paths, right? And it's like, huh, there really is no difference, right?
Really?
And so I find that fascinating as well, right? Like I'm always intrigued. I'm a curious guy. Like, how did you get there? And then when I listen, I go, "You sure you haven't been following me along my path?" And
Yeah, I really think everybody has. We're all walking the same path. It's just a different crayon. That's it.
yeah, and because for the longest time for me, I didn't know people didn't live the way that I live.
Mm,
I really didn't. I mean, even as a kid, like before things started to change, yeah, me and my sister and my friends, we played on the playground, had fun and swinging, being on the merry-go-round, the death circle, where you go fast enough, you get thrown off and things like that. Like this is the way we grew up, right? But similar things, like what I'm saying, my family, we was always taught, children is to be seen, not heard, right?
mm,
You know what I'm saying? We was always told, hey, stay in the child's place. If we even got caught in the same environment where they were having conversations, oh, that backhand across the mouth was something fierce. Get your butt on outside and go play, right? And I'm a Gen X kid too, so don't let it be a weekend or the summertime. Hey, as soon as you get done with breakfast, get your little butt on outside. I don't want to see you till the street lights come on. So
exactly. Same,
it
same.
didn't matter what we did at that point. It was like, oh well, we can't go back home. So
Uh-uh.
we find ourselves in some really, really strange situations.
But
You
same,
know.
Same. Get out of the house and come back when the street lights are on.
Yeah, it's like we don't even get to eat, so we have to figure this out.
Right.
No wonder we was lean kids. What do we do with this? Oh, I guess we go to the ocean. Anybody got a fishing pole?
Right? Playing out in the tide pools, and I'm out there flounder fishing in a dang rowboat with my friends. No joke.
That's what I mean, right? That's crazy. We learned how to clam. we we used to crab, right? Fish and everything. Me and my friends, we figured out how to make fire, right? We learned how to trap like raccoon and possum and squirrels and stuff like that. Oh yeah, oh yeah, we did all of that. I mean, we couldn't go home, so what were we supposed to do? We're growing kids, right?
Right? Right?
If
We
we
didn't
had
we
a
didn't
bite, we
know. You
went.
didn't know you didn't know you're on a building resilience program there, but you were.
You know what? I look back on it now and I realize that now, right? But what is some of your experience like? Like because it's very fascinating. How did you? What was your aha moment when you said, you know what? I need to get this under control,
Oh
right?
gosh.
I
Yeah.
need to start healing. And what did that look like for you?
Oh. So I mentioned earlier that I got off into college that I wanted to get to. I was completely and entirely obsessed with horses since since previous lives. I mean, I arrived here with a complete obsession about horses, and I had gotten myself into this college finally. Where my family, nobody went to college before me or any of that, right? So they were like, "Well, what are you doing that for?" Um,
Hmm.
it was for equine studies and business, and I was like, "Oh yes!" And I had to drop out and go back to Crazy Town, and I'm stuck in my house with the people that I thought I was getting away from and nowhere to go. And that moment was each day my panic attacks were getting worse. So I go to a grocery store and be standing in line and be someone in front of me and then someone, how it's a cart in front of you and they're being waited on and you pull in and then there's someone behind you.
Yeah.
I could not stand being trapped like that. I would run out of grocery stores and leave full carts just sitting there. I couldn't stand in line at the bank. My best friend wanted me to be in her wedding. I said no. My other best friend lived in New York and I was in Massachusetts. I couldn't fly to visit her and I wouldn't go to the city. I mean, all these things that I gave up that um, finally it came to one day that I was at home. The one place I could go was work because after I dropped out of college, I went back to work at a horse barn, a horse facility in Massachusetts. And I could get there and do that because that's the only place I actually felt safe. Getting there was hard, but when I was there around the horses, I was like, whew. But then one day I went home for something at lunchtime and I couldn't leave. I could not step outside the house and go back.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, this is truly nuts. This is the last place I want to be, but I can't leave here. I need to figure something out. And as an aside, just recently in my therapy work, I'm working with a young man who has agoraphobia, married with 2 kids under 3, is stuck in his house. Right. So I go to work at his home with him. And he made the most insightful comment to me recently. He goes, I've been like this for a lot of years because I don't I don't have to leave. These days, Tony, you can order anything in your life that you need.
Yeah.
You don't have to leave the house. I had to leave to get food and I had to leave to earn a living. And so the motivation for I'm either checking out or I got to do something made me pick up the phone. And it really was horses because I thought if I check out, I'm not sure if there's going to be horses where I go next. And that's a deal breaker.
Mm.
So I picked up the phone and I was lucky to meet a wonderful therapist. And he wrote a little forward in my book. We're still in contact 40 years later. Still good friends. But he absolutely changed my life by helping me define my emotions and validate the fact that the craziness I was feeling wasn't my own. It was dropped on me. And I could clear that out and I could go
Right.
forward. So that was the first step that I took to being able to do anything and everything and help other people now do that, which is so satisfying and amazing.
I love that. I definitely love that. I had a question because there's something that said someone had said something to me, or they gave me a phrase one time, and I want to dive into it and get your thoughts on it. But they said some people can be born with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
In the womb.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that fascinating because, I have seen people, like when you're around certain babies and things like that, babies who cry all the time and things like that, I often, when I'm around a child like that, because I love babies, right? Regardless of my own life and things like that, I love being around babies and because they're so much fun, and plus I get the chance to argue with them. I mean, it's not like I win or anything like that. I mean, they still win the argument and everything. They always just boss me around, Bonnie. I don't understand that, you know. But they're like, and it's like when I'm with them, they're so calm. They're so calm. But as soon as I give them to prime example, my son, when he was born, I saw the difference of how he reacted around his mother versus how he reacted around me. Now, this is before I knew what a narcissist was,
Mm-hmm.
and that how she was carrying when she was carrying him, the things that she would do to herself, right? You know what I'm saying? Especially being a narcissist. I thought it was just hormonal until after she had the baby, and I realized, no, this is her, right? But so he was always very, very anxious around her, even as a baby. But when he was around me, he would pin me down and lay his head on my chest and go right to sleep. His mom hated it. And so, when I heard this phrase, that's what it reminded me of. You know, what are your thoughts on that? A child being born in this world with trauma already in them. How do you address those?
That's part of the generational crazy making inheritance, Tony. So we talked before about the outward manifestations of crazy that might come down from
Hmm.
right from on high. The inner stuff, like some people are born with trauma. The mom herself could have been a traumatized person in a very direct situation. Maybe she was beaten or attacked or had a terrible accident, or um, that's going to be transferred to the child. And a child in a womb can hear what's happening, they can feel, right, around them. So parents that are extremely unhappy and maybe fighting all the time and there's a lot of tension,
Hmm.
the baby's going to pick up on that kind of tension.
Okay.
And for myself, I know some people are born with higher sensitivities too than others, um, in all sorts of ways, just to environment, to temperatures and sun and that kind of stuff, but also to noticing the energies and stuff around us and picking up on things. And then other people skate through life like, well, I didn't see that. Like my husband, for instance, the coolest dude there is, friends with everybody, nothing ruffles him. And I'm like paying attention to everything. He's like, ah, don't worry about it. I don't even remember that. Remember? I don't remember that happening. I'm like, oh, I can give you the whole details. I can give you this. I can write a book about what happened. That kind of which, which is a gift and a curse, mind you, um, to be that
I
kind of stuff.
understand.
Yeah. But going back to your son's mom, my mom was extremely narcissistic as well. And the lack of empathy that narcissistic people have, the lack of ability to connect with how others feel, does end up creating anxiety, not only in partners and family members, but mother to child. Oh, hell yes. So,
Mm,
like your son, I know what it's like to be raised by a narcissistic mom. And then the other side, I didn't have Tony hugging me as a baby and making everything okay. My dad was an alcoholic, so he's in his own narcissistic space of, you know, everything's about him because that's what happens with addiction,
right.
sadly. Um, so the two of them together and me in the middle, sensitive anyway, like highly energetic reader of the world, there's no wonder I ended up being as anxious. And it, continues. So then I come out into the world and I'm different than they are. And I see things differently and say things that they're like, that's so weird. Why can't you just relax? You're too
Right.
sensitive.
Right.
What's wrong with you? Like constantly. How could a
Mm.
kid never be anxious? And, we can all, the thing is, we can all rectify this.
Yes.
If
Yes.
we can just reach out to someone else. And I'm not even talking about humans to start with. Some people don't feel comfortable speaking to other humans about their situation. I didn't for years. Talk to your pets, talk to the wildlife around you, talk to the trees.
Yeah.
Go somewhere and let this stuff out. Because if we don't, it'll crush us and create generational crazy making inheritance that just keeps on rolling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm glad that you said that because, I had dogs, right? My dogs they were my protectors. They really were. And, I loved them to death. And, everywhere I went, they was always with me. Whenever I came home, they was always happy to see me. And, and I felt more comfortable around them than I did anything else, right? Because coming from a background of having to fight, almost majority of my life, and learning how to survive, I didn't have any safe spaces, right?
Right.
Because I had to learn how to move. I had to learn, hey, you may get 30 minutes of sleep and you may be up for 23 and a half hours. This is the way you're going to, this is my life. Right. And so, before I really understood that moving around and staying away from things, but I did carry a lot of that with me, right? Because a lot of times I was on the run from the police. So I had if I wasn't worried about one thing, I'm worried about the next thing, right? But also, I was deadly afraid of letting people get close to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have a problem with that from time to time. I'm just like, because I have to ask people, what are your intentions?
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm one of those dudes. You have to relay your intentions towards me before I let you in, right? Because I need to understand. Are you going to try to do something to me later on? And it sounds strange being a man, right? But again, learning how to articulate that was one of the things that was a language that I had to develop, right? Because I didn't know.
Mm-mm.
I didn't know that I had that fear because I have never been afraid of anything. But then I realized that, hey, I may not be afraid of this, but I'm afraid of this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that just came from the environment that I was around with people that tried to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. More than once. And I was looking at them going, y'all do realize this is not going to work. Right. But I didn't realize I carried that with me for quite some time. And it just kind of, because after a while, everybody just started to look alike. Right. You know what I'm saying? The people I was around and no matter where I went, it was always like, no, you're not going to get the opportunity to do it. Like relationships and things like that. Like I said, a lot of unhealthy relationships. And in the wake of understanding that, I did a lot of damage to a lot of people. Not intentionally, but mentally, emotionally, I hurt a lot of, a lot of relationships I was in. I'm not gonna say a lot of majority of relationships I was in. I did some damage to those women, right? That later I had to go back and go, look, hey, I do apologize, right? And they just kind of looked at me like, you apologizing? Yeah, I'm apologizing because I was wrong. Right, but it took a long time to be able to articulate what was going on, and I love the fact that you mentioned that because it's a whole different language in itself.
Oh, it is. Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And hurt people hurt people.
Right.
Right. You've heard that, and we train our boys and men to be rugged individualists, to suck it up, to don't admit it. Where do you think that goes? All over everybody else.
All over, yeah.
Right? And we continue to treat boys and men this way. Like to think that it's weird to say, I have a fear. Well, yeah, if you grow up in a situation like you did, and you are actually afraid of maybe somebody trying to shoot you, then maybe when you get into a relationship where you have an opportunity to expose your vulnerabilities, you're going to want to know what that person's intention is, right? They may not have a gun, but they can wreck you with no weapon.
Yeah.
That's their intention, right?
Yeah.
So you get mixed up with a highly narcissistic person, they might as well have a weapon. Because if you stay for that and get pulled into that and get drawn into the crazy making that kind of relationship creates, yeah, you're in big trouble. So that we don't help men to identify what their own emotions are, to
Mhm.
express them healthfully. Oh my gosh, I just had a flashback. I was at a wellness group meeting a little bit ago, a community meeting, and a woman said, "My husband's a great guy, but he only has one emotion, anger." She goes, "If he's sad, he's angry. If he's frustrated, he's angry. If he feels like he's ripped off, he's angry. If he's impatient, he's angry. That's all he's got." And I said, that's the inheritance we've handed to the males in societies, our own and others, that anger is macho, it's strong, and it covers up all the other stuff that we all have. I don't care what your gender is, that we all deal with all the time. And we're trying to just keep it under wraps, keep the prairie dogs from hopping out of those holes too quickly, right? We're all whack-a-mole in it every day, just doing this. And if we can just share that, everybody else that you know has so many of the same struggles that you have.
Mhm.
You can just talk about it with someone like, yeah, I didn't know you felt that way too. I have a hard time with talking to my spouse about how I'm feeling, or admitting that I'm afraid of this new thing that I'm doing at work, or worried about what's going to happen in the environment and what's going to happen with us politically. And I'm terrified to send the 6-year-old to school. I mean, the list goes on.
Right.
But if we just shove that stuff down, it doesn't stay down. It comes out.
It does. It
Yeah.
does.
And usually
And
hurting other people.
yeah, and it's a lot of times I'm glad that you brought up how people dump that on our young boys and our men, because I do work with a lot of men, and and I do hear the stories from their significant others, their partners, where they're like, hey, like this is what's going on, why is he's so emotionally unavailable, or so distanced in these ways, right? And so as being a man, often, and I'm about to write a book on this as well. When men grieve, it's like a foreign love language that no one else speaks, right? Now, I can be around another man, and the language that we use helps me understand what they're going through. So, is one of the things about anger that a lot of people don't understand. You're right. This is how we show masculinity, right? Because our whole entire lives we get told what? You better shut up when we give you something to cry about,
Oh God, yes.
right? You know what I'm saying? Or you gonna have to man up, right? But we're getting taught these things from the adults in our lives,
Mhm.
right? And so, what does I go to when we can't cry? What does I go to? Anger, right?
Yep.
So, as you've probably seen this before, right? Young men will go out there and pick fights with their friends, argue with their siblings. You know what I'm saying? And so now we can mask the tears.
Mhm.
Now we can I don't have to show vulnerability to you, because now you're not going to question my masculinity.
Mm.
And that's one of the things, right? That's one of the things. So whenever I talk to them, I go, what are the things that you see? They go, well, he's always angry. I go, have you ever seen your man cry? They go, no. I go, what if I told you you have?
Wow.
And they go, what do you mean? His anger is him crying.
Mhm.
He doesn't know how to express that without feeling as if he's going to lose value in your eyes. So one of the things about men that people don't understand, we value being needed,
Mm.
right? We value being valued in that relationship by what we provide.
Mhm.
Our roles, as we've been always taught, is to provide and protect, right?
Yep.
So anything outside of there, and it's something that's been taught across the board. Men are only valued for what we provide, what we bring to the table. And so when that's embedded in us, it becomes a way of life. So if I came, say for instance, if I came home and I you know there's bills that need to be paid, right? They're laid out. I'm gonna grab all those bills. I'm gonna go pay them. Period. Without any question. If I come home and I see you crying, well, my job is to make sure that I'm protecting you, your emotions, etc. Screw mine, right? Because they have no place in what's going on.
Right.
And so, when a male feels as if they can't provide, or they have an injury and they feel that they can't protect you, we begin to question the value that we bring to you. And automatically, this is the way we think. He's going to get rid of me.
Yep. A lot of fear. A lot of fear there.
Fear, right? And so, and that's why I tell people, like, there's a lot of things that you have to understand when it comes down to a male psyche, right? And as being a male, it took me a long time to develop the language um, of understanding what I was going through. And I had to become emotionally aware, but also not being afraid of being vulnerable, right? I had to, and here's the crazy part. I had to create my own atmosphere within me to feel comfortable enough to tell you, no, I'm not okay, right? And whether you receive it or not is totally up to you. It had nothing to do with me. So
Right.
that was another thing, right? You know what I'm saying? Because as you said in the beginning, it's not personal. It has nothing to do with me, right? And so when people looked at it that way, I was like, no, if you don't like it, you don't have to be around me. I'm okay with this now, right? But it took a long time for me to get there, Bonnie. It really did. It was like, am I okay to say this? You know, we we question ourselves, especially when we're dealing with grief and trauma and the mental health issues that come along with that,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, right away when you're talking about in a relationship, you're angry and you can't, and that's all you can show. You can't show the vulnerability behind that because then you won't be the provider, the protector. And if the get lost in that fear of being rejected by your significant other, your society, your everything, that's where addiction and suicide are coming from, right? So that how many of those guys are going to come home feeling all the things that they feel, not being able to express it, and go to pour themselves a drink or get high, right? Um, that's the only way that some people have been able to soothe themselves because there's so much of that stuff that's just stuck. And when I talk with women who, and I can only come from a heterosexual relationship personally, but this applies to my own relationship with a wonderful husband that I adore. If sometimes I don't want a solution, if I'm crying or come to you with a problem, I don't need you to solve it. I just need you to be there in it with me for a little bit.
Right,
Just like
right,
validate it. And when you're taught so much to be that provider, that protector, that solutions guy, well, you should try this. Or if you did it that way, or if you said this, like, well, yeah, I've thought of all those things, but right now I just really need you to be with me. And that's so hard, right? When I'm not going there because my fears might come up, and then there might be this whole thing, and that men are so struggling so much with that fear of losing the status of protector and provider. And women don't see it that way usually. Can't speak for everybody, but women don't usually see it that way. That there isn't a loss of that because you allow yourself to be vulnerable and connect with what's happening and be in the sadness and maybe cry about something doesn't mean that everything's lost, but that is what you're trained, that is what you're taught.
yeah,
You do
yeah,
that, no one's gonna then no one's gonna love you, no one's gonna think that you're worth anything, la la la. It's so not true. And it feels like on both sides we're constantly fed all of this false information,
yeah, yeah.
and then we build relationships around it, and then we wonder why people get divorced and drink and do drugs and commit suicide and beat people up and torture animals and you name it. It's like, ah,
Yeah, and it goes. You already know it's so much that goes along with that, right? It's so much to unpack in that, and just that right there, right? It's like, wow. Every time we get rid of one thing, we got to deal with another thing, right? But here's the thing, right? Here's what I try to tell, remind people. I never try to tell anybody anything. I just try to remind them.
Mhm.
I look at their age and I go, so you've been dealing with all of these things your whole entire life. I'm 50 years old. So, for me, it was like I've been dealing with these things for over 40 some years.
Mhm.
I've only asked for help once. So you think that I'm going to unpack 40 some years of trauma and and PTSD and all the grief that I've had to deal with in one day? No, it's going to take time because there's things that my brain has kept me safe from that I'm going to have to crack open and say, no, we have to go back in and deal with this.
Mhm.
Because the last thing I want to do is get to a certain place thinking that I'm doing okay and have that come back up on me. And then I spill over onto someone else. Right.
Mhm.
That's my mission. I'm not doing that no more. I'm like, no.
Mhm.
So I'm very, very I'm very cautious and aware of that. Most people will go, you're emotionally aware, you're emotionally intelligent, and things like that. And it's two separate different things, but it takes a while to develop one as well as the other.
It does. It's a one step at a time process, and it does take some time. When I think of
Mhm.
how many years, how many decades I've been working on this from the day when I couldn't leave my home to doing all the things that I want to do in my life. It was not an overnight situation.
Right.
But when I first accessed therapy, it was talk therapy, and it's very helpful to work with a therapist who will listen to you and can validate your concerns and can help you see things that you can't necessarily see when you start. That's very helpful. What I've learned since then, though, is that talk therapy is limited because, like, say, a client comes in to to work with me, or even in coaching, someone will come in with stuff and it just be, this is what's happening. And okay, I'm listening attentive, I'm validating, I'm with you. And then the session is over and they go home with all the same stuff they brought in. Yes,
Right.
they got validation, they got venting, but it's still there. And so what I have added both as a practitioner and one who receives from others is energy modalities, EFT tapping, Jin Shinjitsu, a Japanese meridian-based energy modality, a modality that I created way back in 2005 called Wildlife Imagery. Like, I need the power of protection right now. Please let me bring up wolf. I need a wolf right here to be with me because I can't talk to any of these people at the moment. Um, eh, there's all sorts of energetic pieces that can be added to the talking coaching or talking therapy that can help people heal much faster than where I started out, and they're safer because you have to be a very careful professional when you're starting to help somebody opening a box that they've had a lid on for so long. You can't just open it up and let it all spring out because
No.
yeah.
That's not fun. Like, oh, whoa, let's
Oh,
fix this stuff back in real quick.
exactly. Oh, well, let that cat out of the bag. It's going out, man. It ain't coming back
Oh
in.
my God.
So yeah, you have to be very careful working with people to make sure that they're ready to take a step at a time, and then people aren't pushed into the overwhelm space. But all of the alternative and evidence-based energy work that I've been exposed to and work in makes accessing these things much safer, and also a lot speedier. We can help people unblock traumatic energies much
Mhm.
faster than just talk therapy. So that's something I'm fascinated by every day and continue to work on and educate myself every day.
Oh, it's a continuous thing, right? As soon as we think that we got something down, something else comes up for us to be able to learn. And as long as you remain a student of it, it becomes this beautiful journey of just information, right? And just putting all of this stuff together. Like, how can I use this? Right, to benefit other people, but also I can use it on myself, right? Trial and error, right? You got to use it in order to be able to tell someone, hey, this is how this works, which brings me to my next question, because I love the fact that you found equine therapy,
Mhm.
right? And I heard so many amazing things about that. And to me, it's understanding. I have a friend who has a horse, and she's taken me out riding a couple times, and I love it. Right, her horse Jackson, he always takes care of me. Every time I'm with him, he's like, "Come here, Tony." I'm like, "Oh, okay," and he kind of nudges me, "Come on, jump on up here," right? So I do that. Um, but it also made me so curious because of his beauty, but their empathy, right? They're into empathy to you, right? And I've heard stories. I've never seen this before, but in some of the places they bring people out who have been dealing with grief and trauma and addiction and things like that, and they bring all of these horses out, right? And these horses are so in tune to what you're going through that a particular horse may come up to you, right? And that'll be the horse that you will actually be in tune with, and that horse will take care of you, right? Is that your experience as well?
Yes, it is. I'm laughing because the first time, like I said, I was into horses in my previous lives. I don't know
Hmm.
who I was or where I was, but I showed up with this, right? Completely obsessed with them. And then a friend of my sister's, when I was 10 years old, a friend of my sister's who had been working at the local stable, and I had no idea she was doing that, but recognized my desperate obsession and took me on my very first trail ride on a horse. And I don't have words. I'm still looking for words in our language that describe the way my world tilted at that moment. I don't have any. But my life changed completely in that moment, instantly. And after that, it was, 10 years old, after school, every weekend, every vacation, I'm shoveling horse poop for riding lessons. And then camp counselor, then instructor, then trail guide, then, all the things, manager, blah, blah, blah. But the thing about horses, and I have conducted these just like you described, which you've obviously done it because you described it perfectly. I've conducted these experiences for our local battered women's shelter here, working with women who have been traumatized and bringing them to the groups of horses. And as you say, we're just kind of out there around them, and sometimes they'll come right up and connect with you. Others will walk away, and it's the most amazing experience. But I didn't know as a 10-year-old that what I was getting was therapy.
Yeah.
I walked into equine therapy with my eyes wide open. All those years, I don't know how I would have survived what was going on inside of me because they were the first beings I told my stories to.
Right.
I didn't tell any people because I wasn't safe, just like you. I don't know your intention. I don't feel safe here. And I would talk to the horses. To this day, I talk to them all the time. And I became a therapeutic riding instructor for kids with disabilities, adults with MS, with two specialties. And I do a little bit of local still of equine therapy with my own senior gelding, my 28-year-old horse who's wonderful at it. Um, and part of that is that people may not realize this because horses are so enormous and powerful, but they are prey animals. And prey animals, is what I felt like, are always watching out for what's happening. They
Hmm.
pick up on all the energetics around them, right? They read the world by energy. So when you come in a situation in equine therapy, they'll mirror your emotions back to you. And if you approach a horse angrily or you're really dysregulated, they're going to back off. Not necessarily a therapy horse because they're different than the average horses. But the average horse will be like, "Oh, nope, thank you. I don't want that energy. I'm out of here." Um, as a prey animal, that's their survival instinct. And so I've compared um, really sensitive humans to horses on the outside of the herd. Horses have a hierarchy, right? The boss
Hmm.
mare, there's a stallion, he's always looking for the attacks. There's the boss mare and everyone below her. And they constantly vie for position. And now I'm going to challenge you. Well, no, you're not. I'm going to bite you in the butt and you're out of here. And I'm still in my position. You just go back, the kick or, whatever. And they're quick, man. You think those big animals, they can spin around and whoosh, in 1 second, that leg comes flying out. You better not be near it. That's all I can say. But
I've seen like documentaries.
yeah, like the wild Mustangs and such, man.
Yeah, I've seen like there. As a matter of fact, it's crazy because I was watching a documentary here in Colorado, where there's like a whole like group of wild horses running around,
Mhm.
up in the mountains and things like that, and they're just constantly running around, right?
Yep.
And this film crew was following them, and one of the horses let him get too close, and it's almost like the horse set him up. And I couldn't do anything except for laugh when this happened, right? Because it got so close, he got so close to him, and he was like, "Oh my God, this horse is gonna let me pet him and things like that." He was so excited, and that horse turned around and gave him a whoop, bam! He just went down on the ground, and I shouldn't have laughed, but it was funny the way he went down. I was like, "Hey, I bet you won't try that no more, right?"
No, no.
Maybe
Oh my
you
gosh.
but I'm not going to walk up to a wild horse like that.
Right.
I'm
Oh,
not.
people, in Colorado, elsewhere too, but in Colorado, people getting close to wild animals to take photos is
Yeah.
a thing. They get hurt all the time. It's like they're wild people. Don't do that. But when I talking about the therapeutic, what you learn about horses hanging around with them, and when you can understand their language, like I understand their language, every shift of the eye, twitch of the ear, turn of the neck, swish of the tail, like I've been around them for so long and watching them communicate that I
Mhm.
understand their language between each other. And there's that hierarchy, and comparing very sensitive people to the lower level horses, I understood one day that, wow, they're always the last to eat, right? There's that one on the outside is got to wait for everybody else. And that sensitive one, is the one that keeps everybody else safe. Because while they're all vying for position and getting their food on, la, 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 and this one is like looking around and sees danger coming and twitches an ear, and all the other ears twitch, and then boom, they're gone. Being prey animals, flight is their number one defense. Fight if they
Mhm.
have to, flight when they can, right? So it helped me understand sensitive people, highly anxious people, people on the spectrum are really often attracted and attached to nature in a way that other people aren't, that have kind of lost more of that.
Mhm.
um but yeah, there's that low horse on the totem pole, and that human being who's struggling to understand what all the other humans are doing. That horse is the one who saves everybody else's butt when danger shows up. It's quite
That's
interesting.
fascinating.
Yeah,
That is so fascinating. Thank you
they're
for
so,
that.
they're
Yeah,
so cool.
I
So
know. I'm just imagining it in my head because I haven't been around horses as much as I would like to, and that's like another adventure for me to be able to go and do things like that because I'm always looking, to improve who I am, right? To have a better understanding of this thing called grief,
yeah.
right? And how it affects us and the different ways that we can have therapy and the different things that we can do. Like I know connecting to nature is one of them, right? I love being out in nature. I love fishing. I love, but I do spend a lot of time alone out in nature as well.
Mhm,
Just connecting, feeling the energy,
mhm.
right? It helps ground me. And I know a lot of people go, well, being alone is not, oh, you shouldn't do that. But for me, it's comforting,
Mhm,
right? It's
mhm,
comforting because I can quiet myself down. I can quiet down everything around me. And I've learned to just slow things down,
mhm.
slow it way down. I tell people this all the time. I'm such a patient individual that I can watch a blade of grass grow for hours, right? And not have a care in the world. I can watch that blade of grass grow just for hours on end and be okay with that, right? But of course, that's what life has taught me to be patient,
Mhm.
right? And so it's just one of those things. And I realize that some people get in too much of a rush And that's when they find themselves in trouble. They rush the process,
Yeah.
right? So breath work and all of those different things. Go ahead, please.
No, I'm saying yes. That's rushing to process. Rush and process can't be in the same sentence.
Right now. And so now was lead us to current day, right? Because with the world that we live in now,
Yeah.
it's a mess.
A mess.
There's a mess out there. Now, are you seeing an increase of people struggling with anxiety and all the different things that are coming along with that, right? Because we now have entered into a stage of our lives where everything is uncertain, right?
Yeah, we have. Yes. That hit me for a minute because two 20-something people that I know well took their lives in the last few months because of that increase in all of the external craziness. And I hear from people all the time how I don't know how I can't do this. I'm checking out. How do I go forward? I wake up in the morning and I just want to pull the sheet over my head. Like I'm afraid of the next thing. So yeah, the anxiety is not being lowered in the general populace. It's increasing. And as the years that I spent as a middle school teacher and a staff coach, the levels of anxiety in kids, yeah, of course. And I'm here in Lafayette, Colorado, right? We had a King Soopers shooting a couple of years ago. We had the Marshall fire a few years ago.
Wow.
And these are kids who are in my hood, were in my school classrooms, seeing them and just watching so much how it changed their personalities. And then, of course, every kid in America worries about school shootings, right? And their parents. And so that trickles down. And yeah, so the short answer, yeah, anxiety on the way up, not the way down. So if we don't share with each other, or we don't have some outlet with whom to share, I started with horses and dogs, and they're still my favorite. Therapists and teachers always will be. If there isn't someone to express that with, it's going to get trapped and it's going to come out someplace else. And the rate of teenage suicide is increasing, not decreasing. And kids vaping and getting into drugs and alcohol and at young ages, all of that stuff, because we're not dealing really well with what we need from each other, what we need to create together. And unfortunately, right now, forces outside of ourselves are creating the angst that causes division between people. Right. And so that's an extra layer that we're looking to manage with each other and for ourselves. But when you talk grief, a lot of people think grief is just about having lost someone, that a person died or an animal died that you loved and cared about, and they were lost to you. But grief is also in so many other ways manifested, different kinds of losses. Like I went through a grief period about dropping out of college because my dream was dead, right? And you grieve the losses of relationships in other ways. People break up and get divorced, and friends lose their connection. And there's a lot of unrealized and untapped grief within us that isn't necessarily about the one that's acceptable. Oh, well, he's grieving because his son passed away. Well, of course he's grieving. But there's 6 other things going on that are losses for that person that are also grief that need to be supported, right? And dealt with. And I don't think we always recognize that grief is a whole bowl of loss that we need to help each other out with.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I remind people of, and I think that's one of the many reasons why I love grief, right? And I love everything about it because how it connects us as human beings. And you can grieve almost anything. It's not just about the loss, You can grieve this life. You can grieve your job. You can grieve the car that that broke down. You can anything that is that you could think of. You can grieve,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can grieve that. Right, right. It's so multifaceted. There's so many levels to this, and and just like yourself, I am fascinated by it all,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because every time I go down another path, it's like, ooh, that's cool, right? And then I want to dive into it because I want to understand more. And I think most of it for me is, I want to be effective in the lane that I'm in, right? Like I'm not trying to go outside of my lane. I'm effective in this one, right? But it helps me understand um, human beings, right? As individuals, because that's where the respect comes from. And I always want to make sure that I'm in that space with them and I respect that with them, right? Make sure that they're heard and seen. And make sure that I'm visiting with them in their space too, right? You know what I'm saying? And not taking over, but allowing them to just be,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's their experience. And
Yeah.
so I'm always fascinated by it. I'm always fascinated by it. I wake up in the middle of the night just like, ooh. Like we're gonna go down this rabbit hole. And I love it. I truly love it. Um, but now it leads me to my next question. You know, um, where can people find your book?
Oh, my book. People can find my book on Barnes and Noble, Amazon. It's a Kindle. I'm working on the Audible right now. I'm not quite finished recording it. Or just on my website. You can go right from my website and get it. It's just bonniebrindle.com. It's super easy.
There you
And like I
go.
said, purposely accessible because people are busy and there's a lot going on.
Yes.
But I wanted to include enough of a memoir of how you approach how someone can approach discovering the roots of anxiety,
Hmm.
and the path that I created is like a recognition. It helps us make it okay to recognize that we all have these difficulties and these triggers and these bottled up emotions that can safely be released, and that we can find ourselves a lot happier and stay in relationships that are good and draw boundaries around others that we don't need,
Hmm.
and live more peacefully. So yeah, that's easy to find, and that's why I wrote it.
I love it. I love it. People go check her out. And get that book, man. If you guys love this conversation, there's so much more inside of the book that you guys could benefit from. But now my next thing is, how can people find you?
And again, my website is super easy, bonniebrindle.com. And right on the header, it tells about my services, a community, an online community that I've started called Peace Now, where people come on twice a month. It's free for the first 30 days, low cost to stay. And we discuss some of these things. It started as, from what you said, are people getting more anxious? Yes, a lot of people became more anxious with the shift in the US government. And
Mhm.
a lot of people were calling me and saying, how can I do all this? So I kind of started with that, but then opened it again to all of the issues, all of the griefs, all of the stresses, all the anxieties that people bring, so that we can support each other and have a release for that. And it's not, um, it's easier to access than individual therapy, which might not be what everybody needs. It's coaching is a group. Um, and there's a contact page on the website. And if somebody has a question or wants to know, how could I serve them, all they have to do is send a question. I'm not going to call your home or badger you with emails or anything like that. And I understand the hesitation. Oh my gosh, believe me, I do. But if somebody has a question about that, I'd be happy to answer it or direct them to somebody who can answer the question if it isn't me. I just, in the collective, I want us all to be able to take the temperature down and to rebuild the connections and get back to a place where every little thing doesn't trigger us about each other, and
Right.
that we don't define each other on one aspect that we might not agree. It, yeah, it's really, I think that is part of Why things have ratcheted up so much is that the lesson for us is to figure out how to get back to a level of respect and dignity and caring
Mhm.
where people don't have to feel threatened and worry about intention every time they connect with someone.
I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that because that's one of the things I still struggle with
Me too.
is intention, right? Because I never know. I
Yep.
never know.
Yep.
And I didn't, and I'm still working on it. I'm a work in progress. I'm always going to be a work in progress, right? But one step at a time. I've done a lot of work, and I know I have a little bit more work to go. But as I grow, I learn more, right? I learn more. Now, my next question would be, and I love this question right here, um, and I love people's answers. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
If I had a superpower, what would it be? The ability to help people realize that they're safe in being their authentic selves. Now, I'm not sure what that would look like as a manifestation, but if I could just, you are safe, be your authentic self, tell your truth, share with other people, and you're going to feel a lot better than trying to bottle it up and hold it and squeeze it all day long and wake up in the middle of the night and nah. Just be yourself instead of trying to be all the things that someone else tells you to be.
I love
Because
that.
when we're not ourselves, it's all just play. And the
Yeah,
play can get really ugly sometimes. Really.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's
So if I had a superpower, that'd be it. I could just wave my superpower wand and allow everyone to just be who they are and share with each other and take some of that anxiety and stress down for everybody. That'd be nice.
I love that. I love that. And with that being said, Bonnie, thank you for coming in and having this conversation with me. And I really hope we have plenty more and everything for everyone else who have been tuning in on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. Thank you guys for tuning in. I see you guys up there just sitting back, chilling, and everything. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the conversation. If you want to know more, her information is in the YouTube channel. So go down there, check her out, go to her website, get her book, ask questions, please. And know that there's people out here that care, right? That have walked the walk, and not only do we don't just talk, we walk the walk too. And there's a lot of work that can be done. And y'all heard it. Her superpower, she just wants that energy to go down and let you know to be your authentic self, to speak your truth. And so there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in, and thank my guest Bonnie for being here today. Bonnie, again, thank you for being on the show today. I had a blast conversating with you. For everyone else, you guys already know what to do. If this is your first time, you made it all the way through, you haven't already, head over to that YouTube channel for me. Hit that subscribe. Look, it's going across the bottom right there. Hit that subscribe button for me. Hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. And you guys already know we're on a mission to drop an episode every day. So you guys, we have some more amazing people coming for you guys. And if maybe these conversations aren't for you just yet, and if you know somebody who can benefit from these, please share it with them, right? And let them know that there's people out here having these conversations and that they can benefit from them. With that being said, guys, we're going to conclude this episode of the Brief Let's Talk About It podcast. We're going to see you guys in the next one. Enjoy your day, and keep the energy down and be your authentic self. Thank you again, Bonnie.
Thank you. It's my honor.
You're welcome. See you guys in the next one.